By the time Vivian built her criminal empire on my stolen ranch, I already owned the mineral rights beneath every mansion in her development. But let me back up. Picture this. I'm dodging mortars in Eastern Europe serving my country, when I get a call that makes my blood run cold. Some HOA, which named Vivian, has legally sold my grandfather's ranch. 1,500 acres of prime American soil that's been in my family since 1892, the same land where my Purple Heart grandfather is buried. Sold for pennies on the dollar while I'm bleeding for freedom overseas. I come home to the sound of gravel crunching under surveyor boots, watching strangers stake out my family cemetery. Vivian thought she'd stolen everything from a broken veteran who couldn't fight back. What she didn't know was that Grandpa had left me one final gift buried in those 1960s property documents: legal ownership of the ground beneath 50 luxury homes worth $47 million combined. What would you do if you came home to find your inheritance stolen? This is how one veteran turned an HOA land grab into the most expensive property lesson these thieves ever received. My name is Staff Sergeant Ezra Thornfield, a third-generation rancher who just spent 18 months keeping the peace in Eastern Europe. While I was dodging bullets and missing my grandfather's funeral, some HOA vulture was circling my inheritance like a hungry buzzard. The Thornfield Ranch, 1,500 acres of rolling hills, pristine pastures, and the clearest spring-fed lake. This side of the Rocky Mountains, Grandpa built this place from nothing after World War II using his GI Bill and Purple Heart pension. Every fence post driven by weathered hands that knew real work, every barn beam cut from our own timber. This wasn't just property. It was 3 generations of American blood, sweat, and tears. The ranch borders an exclusive development called Willowmere Estates 50 Lakefront Mansions, where tech executives and trust fund babies pay $200,000 to $500,000 for the privilege of living next to real America. These people have never worked a day of honest labor, but they sure know how to complain about the smell of cattle and the sound of roosters at dawn. I pull into my driveway after that nightmare flight from Germany, expecting to see familiar pastures. Instead, I'm hit with the acrid smell of fresh surveyor paint-marking century-old oak trees like death sentences. Bright orange sold signs stab into my family's soil like daggers. Surveyors with clipboards are mapping my land, driving stakes through Grandpa's prized rose garden, where the scent of crushed petals now mixes with diesel fuel from their equipment. 800 acres allegedly sold to the Willowmere HOA for $2.3 million. That's robbery $175 per acre for land worth at least $8,000. My savings account shows $247. My remaining 700 acres are suddenly under development restrictions that nobody can explain. But here's what made my blood boil. They'd fenced off our family cemetery. The sound of chain link rattling in the wind around my grandfather's fresh grave still haunts my dreams. That's when I meet Vivian Ashworth. Picture every nightmare HOA president rolled into one perfectly coiffed package. 52 years old, drives a white Mercedes G-Wagon worth more than most people's annual salary, and measures grass height with an actual ruler. This woman has filed 47 HOA violation complaints in the past year alone. Her victims probably just wanted to live in peace. She's standing in my driveway wearing a smirk that could curdle milk. Military housing allowance doesn't cover property taxes, does it, soldier boy? She says, not bothering with introductions. She shoves forged documents at me papers, claiming tax delinquency that my bank records prove never existed. Your grandfather should have planned better, she continues, adjusting designer sunglasses that cost more than my monthly combat PE. This is what happens when military families think they're above civic responsibility. I'm standing there in my uniform, fresh off 18 months defending her freedom, and this parasite lectures me about patriotism. The irony burns like tear gas. Leave our property immediately or I'll have you arrested for trespassing. She threatens, speed dialing what I assume is her personal sheriff. Here's my nightmare. Divorce lawyers and legal fees had drained my savings to $247. The local attorney Vivian's golf partner couldn't take my case due to conflicts. The county clerk's office lost all original property records. My bank claimed no record of automatic tax payments I'd religiously set up. Standing there, watching strangers stake out my grandfather's grave, I made a silent promise. Vivian had no idea who she was messing with, but something about Grandpa's knowing smile in his old photos suggested he'd left me more than just land. Military training teaches patience, strategy, and finding enemy weak points. She was about to learn why you never mess with a combat veteran's family legacy. Vivian wasn't content with just stealing my land, she wanted to destroy my reputation too. Within 48 hours of our first meeting, she filed a restraining order, claiming I'd threatened her with military-style violence. Complete fabrication. But the local judge rubber-stamped it without even hearing my side. Suddenly, I'm banned from half my own county. But that was just the opening move. She installed military-grade security cameras pointed directly at my remaining property, recording my every move like I was some kind of terrorist. Then came the neighborhood app posts about aggressive veteran behavior and concerning PTSD episodes. The woman was building a narrative, painting me as the dangerous outsider threatening their perfect suburban paradise. Her crown jewel was hosting community safety meetings about undesirable elements in the area. The smell of her expensive perfume couldn't mask the stench of her bigotry as she orchestrated my character assassination with surgical precision. But here's what Vivian underestimated. Military intelligence training doesn't just disappear when you take off the uniform. While she was playing social media games, I was playing chess. And I remembered something my grandfather once told me: when politicians lie, the truth is always in the paperwork they hope you'll never find. I drove 200 miles to the state archives in the capital, spending my last $47 on gas and parking fees. Those dusty basement files held treasures more valuable than Vivian's entire jewelry collection. I found the original 1892 land grant documents, my grandfather's Purple Heart citations, and the smoking gun proof that my property was never delinquent on taxes. Every payment documented and filed, every transaction recorded and stamped. The tax payments, Vivian claimed, never existed. They'd been systematically redirected to the wrong account through a convenient clerical error. One digit off. During my divorce, my attorney had warned me about this exact scam. How corrupt officials redirect payments to create artificial delinquencies, then swoop in for pennies on the dollar. He'd said property owners have redemption rights even after fraudulent sales, and military personnel get extra protections under federal law. I just never thought I'd need that knowledge myself. The county assessor who approved this emergency sale lives in a $340,000 mansion at 47 Willowmere Drive. Talk about convenient timing. But here's where Vivian's greed became her downfall. Her emergency sale happened exactly 30 days before the legal minimum waiting period. She was so confident in her corruption that she couldn't even wait for her theft to be technically legal. In her rush to steal my inheritance, she'd created a paper trail that screamed fraud louder than a smoke detector at 3 a.m. Armed with this evidence, I expected some justice. Instead, Vivian doubled down like a cornered rattlesnake. She hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on my divorce, my deployment record, anything to discredit my claims. Local newspaper coverage painted me as a troubled veteran, unable to accept civilian authority. The editor's wife lives at 23 Willowmere Drive. Small world, right? Then came the harassment campaign. Noise complaints every time I started my tractor before 8 a.m. Sheriff's deputies citing me for disturbing the peace when I ran cattle on my own land, citations for unauthorized construction when I fixed my own fence. It was like living in a police state, except the dictator wore designer yoga pants and drove a Mercedes. But Vivian's masterpiece was pure evil genius. I found surveyor stakes driven through my grandfather's prized rose garden at 3 a.m., destroying 60-year-old heritage plants that couldn't be replaced. Security footage showed the HOA groundskeeper following orders that could only have come from one person. When I confronted her, Vivian's response was ice cold. Those roses were encroaching on community property. We have standards to maintain. Standing there among the crushed petals, breathing in the scent of destruction mixed with diesel fuel from their equipment, I realized this wasn't just about money. This was about power. Vivian got off on crushing people who couldn't fight back. Too bad for her, she'd picked the wrong veteran to mess with. Vivian's response to my evidence was like watching a poker player go all-in with a pair of twos. She hired the most expensive law firm in the state capital, the kind of place where hourly rates start at $800 and the marble lobby makes you feel poor just walking through it. Within a week, I was served with a lawsuit claiming aggressive trespassing and property damage, seeking $500,000 in damages plus legal fees. Her masterstroke. The legal papers described my grandfather's prize, Angus bulls, as dangerous livestock deliberately weaponized against innocent homeowners. I had to read that line 3 times before I stopped laughing. Apparently, cows are now considered assault weapons in Vivian's twisted universe. But 2 can play the expensive lawyer game. I contacted the Military Legal Aid Society, explaining my situation to a crusty old JAG officer who'd seen every scam in the book. "Son," he said, his voice crackling through the phone like autumn leaves, "this smells fishier than a week-old salmon. Let me make some calls." Those calls connected me with Sarah Chen, a property rights attorney from the neighboring state who specialized in HOA abuse cases. She worked pro bono for veterans, having lost her own father's farm to similar corruption. During our first meeting, she pulled out a thick file folder and said something that made my day. "Most HOAs operate illegally due to paperwork lapses, and yours might be no exception." That's when we started digging into Willowmere's corporate structure. What we found was beautiful. The HOA had never properly incorporated with the state. They'd been operating as an illegal quasi-governmental entity for 3 years, collecting fees without legal authority, making rules they had no power to enforce. It was like discovering the neighborhood. Bully was actually a 90-pound weakling, wearing a fake muscle suit. During my deployment, I'd learned that many organizations failed to renew their corporate registration every few years, turning them into paper tigers with no legal standing. Sarah explained that homeowners can challenge the authority of improperly incorporated HOAs and potentially void all their actions. She'd seen cases where residents got years of fees refunded because their HOA forgot to file a single form. But here's where it gets juicy. While investigating their corporate status, we discovered Vivian had personally profited from my land sale. Her landscaping company, Ashworth Aesthetics, received an $180,000 beautification contract from the HOA the same month they acquired my property. She'd literally paid herself with money from selling my inheritance. It was like watching someone rob a bank and then bill the bank for security consulting. Sarah filed a motion to dismiss all HOA actions based on their illegal corporate status. The courtroom was packed when Vivian's $800 per hour attorney had to explain why his client was essentially a criminal organization masquerading as a homeowners association. Watching him squirm was better than cable television. But Vivian wasn't going down without a fight. She called an emergency HOA meeting to retroactively approve all past actions and rush through incorporation paperwork. Only 12 of 50 homeowners attended. Most were traveling or simply fed up with her antics. At 11 p.m., with a skeleton crew of her cronies, she pushed through votes that would normally require a majority of all residents. The smell of desperation was stronger than the coffee they'd been serving since 6 p.m. Vivian's voice had that shrill quality of someone who knows their world is crumbling but refuses to admit defeat. 2 days later, another process server arrived at my door with a new lawsuit, this time for $1.2 million in punitive damages. She claimed my frivolous legal challenges constituted harassment and threatened to seize my remaining 700 acres to satisfy the judgment. The woman had more nerve than a novice skydiver, but her legal position was weaker than wet tissue paper. Standing on my porch reading those papers while my grandfather's wind chimes played their familiar melody, I realized Vivian had just made a fatal mistake. In her panic to stop my momentum, she'd escalated to a level that would bring serious scrutiny to her entire operation. The sound of those chimes reminded me of something Grandpa used to say: when your enemy is making mistakes, don't interrupt them. I was about to let Vivian dig her own grave as deep as she wanted. Vivian's paranoia was reaching legendary levels, having failed to crush me with lawsuits. She turned her sights on every homeowner in Willowmere Estates like a dictator purging potential rebels. Christmas lights left up past January 2nd. That'll be a $200 fine. Someone dared to plant tomatoes in their backyard. $500 penalty for unauthorized agricultural activities. Her masterpiece of petty tyranny came when she threatened to foreclose on elderly Margaret Clearwater's home over $45 in late fees. Margaret, a retired third-grade teacher whose husband died of cancer the previous year, had been struggling to keep up with HOA demands while grieving. Vivian's response: grief doesn't excuse financial irresponsibility. That's when the community finally woke up. You can only kick a sleeping dog so many times before it bites back. Willowmere residents had reached their breaking point. Margaret started a private Facebook group called Willowmere Truth Tellers that grew from 5 members to 43 in 2 weeks. The horror stories they shared could fill a Stephen King novel. Navy veteran Tom Bridgewater, whose meticulously maintained lawn had earned him 3 separate violations for excessive uniformity, became my unlikely ally. Encounter at the hardware store. He pulled me aside and said, "That woman's crazier than a soup sandwich, son. What can we do to stop her?" I started organizing Know Your Rights workshops at the local library. The first meeting drew 8 curious neighbors. The second drew 22. By the third, we had standing room only. Asterisk, asterisk, during one of these sessions. Margaret dropped a bombshell while cleaning out her late husband's papers. She'd found the original HOA covenants from 1965. Her husband had been on the original development committee, and he'd kept everything. The brittle yellow pages contained language that made my heart sing. The bylaws explicitly prohibited any land acquisition beyond the original 50-lot plat. Vivian's purchase of my property didn't just violate state law, it violated the HOA's own founding documents. She'd committed what lawyers call ultra-virus acts actions, so beyond her authority. They were legally void from the start, but Margaret wasn't done. Tom's investigation into the pool maintenance fund revealed $89,000 missing over 3 years, flowing directly to Ashworth Aesthetics for services never performed. The pool itself was green with algae, broken filtration, diving boards held together with duct tape, yet Vivian's company had billed $30,000 for premium maintenance. Last year, when confronted at the next community meeting, Vivian hired security guards, scheduled votes during working hours, and threatened legal action. But Margaret stood up. "Vivian, I've lived here longer than you've been alive. This isn't about outside agitators. This is about a board member stealing from her own neighbors." The applause shook the windows. Sarah called me at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. "Ezra, you need to sit down for this. I found something that makes Vivian's worst nightmare look like a pleasant dream." She discovered that when Willowmere was first developed, the original landowner sold only the surface rights. The subsurface rights mineral foundation and support were retained. My grandfather bought them in 1963 for $500. That meant I legally owned the ground beneath every mansion in the development. Asterisk, asterisk, I could demand the removal of all 50 homes, costing $12 to $15 million, or sell the rights for $45 million. When Sarah broke the news to Vivian's legal team, their $800 per hour attorney requested an emergency meeting that cost $25,000 in one afternoon. Their conclusion: my position was unassailable. Vivian's world crumbled. Moving trucks appeared. Home values crashed. Margaret called Ezra honey. Vivian's been driving around the neighborhood for 3 hours, just circling like a lost dog. Tom said, "That woman thought she was playing chess with a country boy. Turns out you were playing 3-dimensional chess." Asterisk, asterisk, I had the nuclear option. But military training teaches us to achieve objectives with minimal collateral damage. The enemy was Vivianette, the innocent homeowners. I offered a settlement, return my stolen land plus compensation, or face evacuation and criminal prosecution. Our evidence arsenal was devastating. Mineral rights documents, forensic analysis of forged papers, financial records, video proof. Margaret, our secret weapon, had recorded Vivian bragging about forging tax documents after 3 glasses of wine at Bridge Club. Tom organized a veterans convoy from 4 counties. The media strategy was surgical. Contrast my grandfather's service with Vivian's theft. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. Then came sabotage. My water well cracked, anonymous environmental claims. Rumors of PTSD, a bribery attempt, $500,000 cash to relocate somewhere more suitable for a veteran with your challenges. Then professional vandals cut my fence. One of my grandfather's prized Angus cows was killed on the highway. The headline, "Troubled Veterans' Negligence Causes Highway Accident," but we were ready. The FBI had frozen Vivian's Swiss accounts. Her escape plan to dissolve the HOA, liquidate assets, flee to Switzerland was exposed. At the final community meeting, I stood before 200 residents and said, "Before we discuss money, let's discuss ownership." I projected the 1963 mineral rights documents. I own the ground beneath your homes. Market value, $47 million. Or you can relocate $15 million. Margaret played the recording, Vivian bragging about forging documents. FBI agent Rodriguez stepped forward. "Vivian Ashworth, you're under arrest," Sheriff Mitchell added, "and for conspiracy money, laundering, and about 15 other charges." The handcuffs clicked shut. The veteran convoy's motorcycles roared in victory. Justice was swift, 5 years in federal prison. $2.1 million restitution, my 1,500 acres were restored. The new HOA, led by Margaret and Tom, operated with radical transparency. I sold the subsurface rights at 20% below market value, $8.2 million over 10 years, 0 interest, a veteran's discount. The librarian who helped me. We adopted 2 children of a Marine who died in Afghanistan. The Thornfield Veteran Scholarship Fund has supported 47 students. And when another veteran calls, desperate and betrayed, I tell him, "Son, pack your legal documents. We're going to war." Because some battles don't end with surrender. They end with victory so complete, the enemy's defeat becomes everyone else's liberation. This is what happens when David doesn't just beat Goliath, he teaches every other David how to use a slingshot. ****.